From the News Channel 5 Network, this is MorningLine with Nick Barris.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us on MorningLine. Nick Barris here on a Tuesday. I hope if you were off on Labor Day, you had a good extended weekend. It's good to be back. We're with you live this morning. We'll open up the phone lines and get it going. And if you'd like to join in the conversation, fine. If not, you may want to sit back and just listen, as this morning we're going to be talking about a broad range of issues, I believe, as they relate to race in this country and how it might relate to some of the major issues leading up to the presidential election, be it health care or be it issues of gun control or gun violence, and how we vote and how we perceive the issues of race in this country, which certainly is something a lot of people are talking about. To discuss this with us is going to be a professor, a doctor from over at Vanderbilt, who has written several books, who speaks on this both locally and nationally and has a lot of thoughts on it, and maybe some aspects of it maybe that you haven't considered. So let's introduce him to us all as he joins us by Zoom, the miracle of that, which has worked out great on our morning show. Jonathan Metzl's with us this morning. Good morning, Professor. How are you?
I'm great. Good morning from my kitchen. The miracle
from your kitchen. We have people joining us from all the different rooms in their homes where they're staying. Yeah. So really appreciate you coming on. And it's interesting. You've spoken and written so many books over the years. And I just wanted to give some of our viewers, perhaps, who aren't familiar with your work and some of the things that you've been talking about, a little bit of background and maybe some of what you've been writing and talking about of late. I think especially as it relates to race issues and in this being in an election year. Do you mind giving us a little bit of an overview of that briefly?
No, not at all. I'm happy to. So my last book was called Dying of Whiteness, and it kind of a provocative title. But what I did in that book is I looked at debates in this country, and particularly in places like Tennessee. A lot of my research is in Tennessee, looking at issues like healthcare and education and gun safety, and really asking, how come we kind of can't all get along about things that seem like they should be good for us? In other words, like we would want to all have good healthcare, health insurance. We want our schools to be good. We have a Second Amendment, but we want less gun death and more gun safety. These are obviously very charged political topics, but I kind of ask in my work, why is that the case? And what I find is that these questions of race and racism are used as kind of triggers to, I feel like, really almost disinform people and get them off track about talking about common purpose. And so part of what I do in my work is I say, look, here's what the benefit would be, for example, if we had expanded Medicaid in our state. So why do people have such negative opinions about it? And I look at the campaigns and I see how there are triggers being used that actually have nothing to do with Medicaid at all. That's just one example. And so part of what I do is I show how race really is used to make people feel like they don't really have anything in common with each other, when really they have a lot of common purpose that would be served by working together.
Let's talk with a phrase that maybe you've referenced and others have said, the idea of feeling race. And it was intriguing to me as I started thinking about, do I feel race? I mean, I'm aware of different races, people around me, if they have different backgrounds. I find that very interesting, maybe. But when you say feeling race, does everyone feel race? What do you mean by that?
Well, it's not a term I use, but I certainly think that there are a lot of people in this country right now who are saying that they feel racism, and so part of the issue is that, you know, when especially if you're a white American and you're walking down the street, it's not like you have to be, in many places, super self-conscious about being white. But a lot of people who aren't white are telling us right now that that's not the case for them, that they feel surveilled, that they feel stigmatized. And so I think it's important as a country with lots of different kinds of people to listen to what people are saying and see how we can fix that. But I think I think it's important to note that the way we describe race, the way we define race, is shaped by all these factors, not just about some intrinsic category of like feeling it, like you feel some, tingling in your skin or something like that, but that all these factors like politics and media and, the structure of our country, they all define what it means to inhabit a particular body. And that's really what I think a lot of the issues are in this country right now, is how can we create a society where people feel the most comfortable and the most at home.
And it seems tricky to be doing that, especially now. I mean, you have the Black Lives Matter issue and the different perceptions people bring to that, all right? You know, Black Lives Matter. There are some that will say, wait a second, all lives matter. And then there will be others who support the movement that say, look, Black Lives Matter because we see so many blacks being shot and killed by police. Do you understand? It's basically meaning Black Lives Matter also. But people bring their different viewpoints to that, and they refuse to, it seems, to consider maybe where the other person is coming from. And I just don't know how you get past that.
I had actually an article in the Washington Post this morning talking about how we're stigmatizing each other in a lot of these conversations, and also how the conversations, Black Lives Matter is a perfect example. There are the politics and the sympathies behind Black Lives Matter, which largely, almost entirely, are kind of a peaceful quest for safety, right? It's not like people are saying we don't want to feel safe in our communities. They're saying the opposite. We want to feel safe in our communities. But when it gets taken up and I understand there's been a lot of different stuff happening, but it's kind of like when things become sensationalized and caught up in these media disinformation campaigns and stuff like that, it's almost like people feel like now, Black Lives Matter stands for looting and burning and stuff like that, when in fact the whole movement is the opposite. And I also argue the same thing about whiteness. Actually, that was the piece in the Washington Post this morning, that we do a disservice to Trump supporters, to white Americans, to people who are really our neighbors, if we stereotype them and say that they're all just gun-toting lunatics running around in the street. Those are the images right now, especially because we're socially distanced, that get played again and again on the media. But it's almost it's hard to realize it, but that represents like 0.00001 of the real people. And so part of the issue is in our echo chamber, particularly of the pandemic. It's dangerous, right? Because it's very easy to say, here's a crazy guy running around in the street with a gun, therefore all Black people or white people must be that way, and really that's not the case, but that's what it seems like right now.
And that's a great point you make. It's magnified because we're in the middle of this pandemic and with so much social separation. So the role of the media in this, I mean, I see that we cover these protests, the rallies, especially when they turn violent, some of these shootings, and I don't know. I mean, we can't not cover these types of things when they happen, but you're correct. I mean, that is the very, very small portion of the bad things that happen, when the majority of it, a lot of the protests, marches, and things that go on both sides of whatever issue you're talking about are peaceful. So I don't know. I guess the media, could we do a better job of that? How do you change that? I mean, we have to cover it when someone is shot and killed.
Well, I mean, I think there are two important points. That's a fantastic question, a really important one. And one is just to think about what's the role of the media in a pandemic. In other words, in our regular lives, we don't really live in echo chambers, right? In our regular lives, you go to work, you go to the gym, I go play softball. On my softball team, I'm the only non-Trump supporter on the team. And I'm the only, person who is not very strongly pro-Second Amendment, but I benefit from engaging with people and learning about their perspectives. And it turns out we all like softball and we do that. And so in our regular lives, we have the workplace, we have just, the world where we engage, and then media comes in on top of that, and then media kind of shape things and things like that. And so media is polarized, but often our lives are not as polarized. But now in the pandemic, especially if we're socially distanced, we're in a kind of like echo chamber where it's very easy just to engage with people whose ideology you agree with. You don't have those kind of interactions with people who might come at things different. And that's really unfortunate, because then these messages become amplified. So partially the issue is that it's just a function of the way we're living right now, the role the media plays. And then the other part, of course, is that definitely not this show, but which is great, right? Call in, talk. But I would say, think about avenues like Twitter, for example. They're designed to put people in conflict. And if you don't believe that, just go on Twitter and type in, I hate President Trump. Everybody will respond. If you type in like, I'm a Democrat, but I think Republicans are really nice. Nobody will respond. And so part of the issue is, we have all these avenues right now that are setting us against each other to the point where compromise, just the idea of a kind of public square becomes very, very, very difficult, I would say. And so it's really, incumbent, I think, on the media to model some kind of cooperation. How can we have conversations showing people of different backgrounds getting along or talking to each other? How can we report on positive things? There was a great report, for example, about in Rochester, church groups went out and stopped violent protest and things like that. How can we do that? But I think it's honestly incumbent on the media now to model cooperation, which is hard to do in an election year. I understand that.
And more important than ever before, to find a way to get that done, and how to get to that is the trick. Listen, we'll take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation, get some of your thoughts as we do approach the election, as you said, and some of the issues and how race and the view of that might shape some of these key issues as we move forward, and whether or not there is any common ground. More with Jonathan Metzl right after this. Stay with us.